Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast, the podcast that aims to be exactly what it says. I'm your host, Onouphrios Dovlepis, and together we'll discover the not so frequently told stories of Greece's history that will change the way you view things forever. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of worlds. At just 20 years old, Alexander III of Macedonia ascended the throne. His military genius was unmatched. His campaigns took him from Greece to Egypt, through Persia, and into India, creating one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. His goal was to take revenge for the Persians' attack on the Greeks in the early 5th century BC. In 334, he crossed the Hellespont, which means the area of Thrace towards Turkey, so from Europe towards Asia, and he won a series of decisive victories against the Persians. At the Battle of Granicus, he defeated the Persian forces, which marked the start of his conquest. His most famous victory came at Gavgamela, that's how we say it in Greek, that's Gaugamela in English, in 331 BC, at the age of, prepare yourselves, 25. The age of Alexander where he did all of those things is ridiculous. That's where he decisively defeated King Darius III and ended the Persian Empire. How many empires have you guys ended? I'm not going to say at the age of 25, even now, older. I don't know how old you might be, 40, 50, 60, anyone who's listening. By the way, a lot of people who are at the age of, I think 40 to 60, a lot of that age listens to my podcast. So I'm not sure how many of you have ended any empires. He ended one at the age of roughly 25. Crazy. To commemorate his victory, Alexander sent Persian shields to Athens to be placed on the Parthenon. Athens had played a significant role in the Greek resistance against Persia during their invasion in Greece a century earlier. Although the shields haven't survived, the big holes where they were hung can be seen even today above the columns of the Parthenon. Many people ask me when we do the tour, what are those holes above the columns? That's where they put the shields. The inscriptions carved on them read, Alexander, son of Philip, and the Greeks, apart from the Spartans. He knew how to hold a grudge for their answer to his father. He was like, I'll show you now, Spartans. So what set him apart from other leaders was not just his battlefield tactics, but also his ability to inspire loyalty. His soldiers believed in his vision of a united world, and he personally led them into battle. They followed him all the way up to India. He must have been very persuasive for those people to pretty much walk their way from Greece to India. Take a look at the map. It's insane. We must not forget that he could also be ruthless, and one famous such example was the siege of Tyre in modern-day Lebanon. That's when thousands of people were killed and sold into slavery, and we'll talk about this in detail in the episode that is only about Alexander. But it wasn't just war and conquest that defined his legacy. He was also a visionary who sought to merge the cultures of the East and West. And he really, really meant it. I'm not just saying that, because usually we say things like this and maybe we wouldn't really mean them. In this case, it was really true. His founding of cities like Alexandria in Egypt and his adoption of Persian customs were part of his plan to create a blended culture. He even married a non-Greek woman named Roxana and was harshly criticized for that. And not just one non-Greek woman, he married 3. But this is the most famous one. In 323 BC, at the age of 33, Alexander the Great died in Babylon. Roxana gave birth to a son a few months after Alexander died. At Philip's tomb in Vergina, the Greek archaeologists found remnants of a teenage boy. That was most likely Alexander IV, that is, the son that Alexander never met. Alexander the Great's death shocked the ancient world, as you can imagine. The vast empire that he had built quickly fractured into many, many kingdoms. Nevertheless, his empire spread Greek culture throughout Asia, starting an era known as the Hellenistic period. Hellenistic from the word Helleniko, as we said, which means the Greek, the really Greek or Greek-like period. From the Greek-speaking cities of Egypt to the edges of India, the Greek influence persisted long after the kingdom itself had faded. Already since the Persians had conquered Greek lands in the 5th century, they relocated Greeks to the far end of their empire. Greek art was so influential that people in Asia probably started making depictions of Buddha, who was never depicted before that time. It has even been suggested that it was due to this influence that the Chinese made the terracotta army. It might be completely false, but it's a theory. The exchange of ideas, technology, and culture between East and West reshaped the ancient world. It also laid the groundwork for the rise of the Roman Empire centuries later. We barely scratched the surface about Alexander's life. We'll talk about him in detail in a series only about him, so stay tuned because it's going to be epic. Aristotle, one of the most important philosophers of the ancient world and also the teacher of Alexander the Great. In the southern part of central Macedonia, there is the peninsula of Chalkidiki, which has 3 legs, as we refer to them in Greek. We're talking about a peninsula with 3 more peninsulas, practically. These legs we call Cassandra, Sithonia, and Athos. Before Athos, that's where my mother's village is. It's the last village before Mount Athos, where actually you can take this boat and you can do a cruise around the peninsula. Because nowadays, Athos is actually an autonomous monastic community where women only are not allowed to enter. Yeah, you heard right. That's a real thing. Women are not allowed to enter in this men-only community. Aristotle was originally from Stagira in the region of Chalkidiki. His father, Nicomachos, was a physician to Alexander's grandfather. This obviously influenced Aristotle's interest in biology and the natural sciences. And because of Aristotle and his interest in the natural world, that's why he actually wanted to record this outside in nature. And I'm in this amazing place. I'm close to the edge of a cliff, which is like over an hour away from Athens. So I'm looking at this impressive gorge in front of me, some beautiful mountains with a lot of green trees. There's a hill with a church on top on my left. There's a monastery to my right. It even rained a few minutes ago, but the weather is pretty nice. Imagine we're in Greece, so the weather usually is quite nice. Right now, for example, the temperature is 13 degrees Celsius. And please do the math and figure this out in Fahrenheit. At the age of 17, Aristotle moved to Athens to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for about 20 years. Not 1, not 10, 20 years. Think about this. Someone that we consider now to be one of the greatest philosophers that ever existed, he was a student for over 20 years. We have a saying about this, by the way, in Greek. We say that you grow old and you keep learning. As you grow old, you keep learning. Girasko ai didaskomenos. His moving to Athens shows the strong cultural ties of northern Greece to the south, and specifically to the culturally powerful city of Athens. His relationship to Plato shaped his early ideas, though Aristotle eventually developed his own philosophies, of course, and sometimes he even opposed Plato's. Around 343, Aristotle was invited to the court of King Philip II, where he took on the 13-year-old Alexander as a student. He was 28 years his senior. Aristotle's teachings, focusing on philosophy, ethics, and the sciences, heavily influenced Alexander's approach to leadership. Alexander famously said about him, "I am indebted to my father for living, but to my teacher for living well." Aristotle is said to have gifted Alexander an annotated copy of the Iliad, which became one of Alexander's most beloved possessions. If you're ever near Thessaloniki, the second biggest city of Greece, where I was born, you can visit the remnants of Aristotle's school near the town of Naousa. That's only about an hour away. So after his time in Macedonia, Aristotle returned to Athens and established his own school that we call in Greek Lykio. In English, you pronounce this Lyceum. That was around 335 BC. Not being a native Athenian, he wasn't allowed to own property, so he rented the building. Wow. One can only imagine the high rents in that area. I feel you, Aristotle. Nevertheless, the famous philosopher received an annual grant from Alexander, okay, which most of us actually don't get nowadays. The 800 talents, as they called that thing back then, talents, and that's where the word talent that we use nowadays comes from this ancient currency. The 800 talents that Alexander sent his teacher now would be even about $15 million a year. Not bad for a teacher's salary, right? But it was Aristotle, to be honest. Unlike Plato's Academy, the Lycion Lyceum focused heavily on empirical research and gathering information from the natural world. It also had a library, and so did Aristotle himself, who was considered to be the greatest book collector of antiquity. That is a site that you can actually visit when you come to Athens. There is not something substantial to see, unfortunately, but this really was the place where the great philosopher taught in Athens. Also, the Acropolis Museum has a wonderful intact bust of the philosopher in its underground level, where you see the ruins of the ancient city. What you can actually see in quite a good condition, though, is ruins of his hometown, Stagira, in northern Greece, as we said, located about an hour and a half from Thessaloniki, and also a few kilometers from the village of Olympiada. Olympiada was named after Alexander's mother. The main square of Thessaloniki was named in his honor, and it also features a seated statue of the philosopher. It's a bit strange that we have the philosopher sitting down because he was known as the founder of the walking school, which we call peripatitiko, peripatetic. It means walking. Also, that could have been, by the way, from the name of a building, because we have to imagine in antiquity, for example, they make a square that becomes a school, it becomes a training place, a gym. It would have a courtyard that was open air, that we call in Greek ethrio, hence the word atrium, ethrio, that is open air, but of course this is surrounded by a roofed walkway in the shape of a square. That part was called peripatos, because you could walk. So probably it has to do with either Aristotle teaching and walking, or teaching in an open place where people could walk protected from the weather conditions. Also, the University of Thessaloniki is named after him, Aristotelio, and it has the largest number of students in all of Greece, more than the one in Athens where I studied. Another university of Thessaloniki is called Macedonia. Philip sought to dismantle the league of some local cities and secure Macedonian dominance in the region, and as part of this effort, he attacked and destroyed some cities, including Stagira, the hometown of Aristotle. However, later, possibly thanks to his respect and gratitude toward Aristotle, Philip allowed Stagira to be rebuilt. Now it really is a wonderful site by the sea to visit, and it's really, really worth visiting, trust me. Roughly 30 kilometers from the site, in the modern village of Stagira, because of course we have the ancient one, and there's a modern one, in this case, not at the same site, it's a little bit further away. Fortunately, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to see the ruins, as is the case in most places in Greece. Like Athens, for example, was continuously inhabited and people built on top of the ancient ruins. So in the modern village of Stagira, you'll find Aristotle's Park. It's a fun spot featuring interactive exhibits based on the scientific principles that Aristotle studied. These experimental instruments operate by rules of physics that are mentioned in the philosopher's textbooks, and especially in the book titled The Naturals, Physica, that means natural. Keep in mind that physics, of course, comes from this, The word physician comes from this as well. Ironically, though, we do not use any word that sounds like the word physician for a doctor. We use the word iatros. That is used in words such as pediatrician. This iatrician is the word doctor in Greek. Aristotle was a keen observer of the natural world, as we said, and he made pioneering contributions to biology, zoology, and many other sciences. He categorized animals into animals with blood, vertebrates, and without blood, invertebrates, and further subdivided them based on their characteristics. His work, History of Animals, is one of the earliest systematic treatises on biology. He pretty much is the guy that came up with most things that we even use today. 1,000 years later, based on the concept of the order and design in the natural world, Christian thinkers of the Middle Ages developed arguments for the existence of God. That's why he was pretty important for religions later. Islamic scholars adopted Aristotle's scientific methodology and made significant contributions to fields such as physics, medicine, astronomy, and biology. They also incorporated ideas such as metaphysics, logic, and ethics into the Islamic teachings. What about geography now? Did he do anything about that? Of course he did. In his book, Meteorology, because he even studied that, he becomes the first person known to suggest the existence of a landmass which he called Antarctica. So he came up with that name. Antarctica means opposite of the Arctic, which is again a Greek word. It comes from the word bear. Arctos is the word bear. That's why we have the Aristotle Mountains in Antarctica that were named after him. He said also that everything has a purpose, and that the ultimate goal of human life is to achieve eudaimonia, that is flourishing, happiness, eudaimonia. Keep this whole thing with purpose in mind. Aristotle also had a concept of a prime mover, a divine being that moves the world and is the cause of all existence. That was used for the Jewish God to present him as the ultimate source of order and purpose in the cosmos. In his work Politics, he explores the nature of the state, citizenship, and different forms of government. He favored the mixed form of government known as polity, which combines elements of democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy. All the major philosophers criticized the Athenian democracy. Keep that in mind. Don't mind the word democracy itself. Today, no one in the world has the original democratic system. I always say that. People think I mean something else, but I always mean that we don't have the ancient system as it was supposed to be. One of Aristotle's famous philosophical concepts is his theory of the golden mean, which is a central idea in his ethical theory. According to Aristotle, virtue lies in finding the mean between two extremes of character traits, each of which represents a deficiency or an excess. For example, consider the virtue of courage. On one extreme, there is cowardice, which is a deficiency of courage. And on the other extreme, there is recklessness, which is an excess of courage. The virtue of courage is found in the middle ground between these two extremes. So he made many such examples, which are really interesting. This golden mean emphasizes the importance of moderation. That is a big thing in ancient Greece, moderation and balance in ethical decision-making, advocating for harmonious integration of virtues in one's character. Here are some of his quotes. The educated differ from the uneducated as the living from the dead. So he really valued education, as you would expect. Those who give good education to children must be honored more than those who gave birth to them. Okay. Because their parents only gave them life, but educators taught the art of well-being. Alexander might have been referring to this, I guess. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. He who overcomes his fears is truly free. Isn't that true? Life is comedy for those who think, and tragedy for those who feel. That is an amazing quote. Life is comedy for those who think, and tragedy for those who feel. There is no genius without the touch of madness. There's only one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. It's really right. Finally, let's get to the death of this incredible philosopher. Aristotle died in 322 BC in Evia. Evia is the second largest island of Greece. It's really close to Athens, and you can even actually just drive to get there. There's a bridge. It's really close to the mainland. That's where his mother was from. That's why he went there. It was only a year after his famous student Alexander had died. After Alexander's death, there was an anti-Macedonian sentiment in the city of Athens, and the Athenians wanted to take it out on his teacher, on Aristotle. The Athenian authorities accused Aristotle of impiety for not believing in the gods, the same way that decades earlier they had accused also Socrates. Fearing a fate similar to Socrates, who was executed in the end by the Athenians, Aristotle reportedly stated, "I will not allow the Athenians to sin twice against philosophy." He sought refuge in Chalkis. Chalkis is practically the biggest city, even to this day, on the island of Evia. That's where his mother was from specifically. The peninsula of Chalkidiki, where he was born, was named after the city. Chalkis, Chalkidiki. Colonists from Chalkis and other places moved to Italy also and spread the alphabet from Greece to the Etruscans, and eventually that's how the Romans got it. The exact cause of Aristotle's death is not known with certainty, but he was about 62 years old. Imagine that he escaped Athens to avoid being executed, and he died the next year. His influence extends across numerous disciplines, including philosophy, as we said, science, politics, theology, and literature. He even wrote the definition of tragedy that we are taught to this day. So, for instance, when I went to acting school, or even a school where everyone goes, we always learn the definition of tragedy that he came up with. His ideas have shaped Western thought for over 2 millennia and continue to be studied and debated by scholars around the world. The name Aristotelis, Aristotle in English, Aristotelis, is derived from the Greek words aristos, which means best, it means excellent, perfect, and telos, which means end, purpose, goal. Put together, Aristotle can be interpreted as the best purpose or the best end, a fitting name for someone who became one of the most influential philosophers with a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, understanding, and purpose.
He once said the fear of death drives all men. Are there no other forces? Is there not love in your life? Alexander. What would you do if you ever reached the end of the world?
Next we get to Hephaestion, one of Alexander the Great's closest friends and confidants, who was integral to the Macedonian campaigns in Asia. His name is related to god Hephaestus, and also the Greek word for volcano. It is indeed a very powerful name that I really, really like. But it's not really common. I don't think I've ever met anyone that is called Hephaestion in Greece. He lived from 356 up to 324 BC. His friendship with Alexander was often compared to that of Achilles and Patroclus from Greek mythology, with Hephaestion being seen as Alexander's closest companion. The depth of their relationship is evidenced by the fact that Alexander reportedly named cities and military units after his friend Hephaestion. Keep in mind that this is how we pronounce the name, Hephaestion. In English, they call the name Hephaestion or Hephaestion. That's how I think they pronounced it in the movie Alexander. But it's nowhere near how we say it, Hephaestion. He died shortly after their return from India, possibly from a fever or illness, although some sources suggest that he may have been poisoned. Who knows? We'll never know. Again, it's a rumor. In his grief, Alexander mourned publicly and ordered a period of national mourning in his empire. He also had a grand funeral for Hephaestion, commissioning an extravagant pyre and temple to honor him. Alexander even deified Hephaestion, treating him as a hero god, which was an unprecedented move. His most notable portrayal in cinema is in Oliver Stone's Alexander in 2004, starring Colin Farrell as Alexander, Val Kilmer as Philip, Angelina Jolie as Olympias, which we mentioned, Christopher Plummer as Aristotle. I didn't mention this when I talked about Aristotle. And also Anthony Hopkins as old Ptolemy. And we're going to get to who Ptolemy was. Hephaestion was portrayed by Jared Leto. I mean, what a cast, right? But 20 years ago, I think many of these actors were not, let's say, they didn't have the status that they have nowadays. Colin Farrell was practically kind of his in beginning, let's say. Jared Leto's rockstar portrayal emphasizes Hephaestion's loyalty and emotional connection with Alexander. Keep in mind, this is how I saw him. He was really like a rockstar, which he actually is as well. And especially during Alexander's moments of grief and triumph, we always see this Hephaestion portrayed by Jared Leto being really emotional, which is really interesting. The movie depicts Hephaestion not only as Alexander's close friend and confidant, but also as a potential romantic partner. But to be honest, I think it focuses too much on another man called Bagoas, a castrated young man from the Persian court. Oliver Stone said that American critics and audiences had blown the issue of Alexander's sexuality out of proportion. For some reason, it's still a big deal. It's still debated. It's this thing that maybe that we say in Greece, there's no fire without smoke. So maybe, since we have the smoke, maybe there was a fire, meaning maybe he was homosexual or bisexual. We don't really know. Back then, I gotta tell you that Greek lawyers had even threatened to file a lawsuit against the director and the Warner Bros. Studio for this inaccurate portrayal of history. We'll generally talk about the film more in the Alexander episodes. But that was it for Hephaestion, who again, as I told you, lived from 356 up to 324 and died shortly before his best friend Alexander. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.